Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the thriller crime films from 2016, titled The Neighbor. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie begins with a woman parking her car at a garage, where she is greeted by a couple named John and Rosie. After confirming the presence of drugs and money in the car's trunk, John treats the woman's bullet wound with the techniques he used during his 3-year stay in the desert. While being treated, the woman, who is a drug courier, calms her child in the backseat. John then changes the car's number plate and instructs the woman to leave. The following day, as Rosie looks outside the window with her telescope, we see their neighbor, Troy, hunting a rabbit. It seems like the couple keeps an eye on their neighbors more often to ensure nobody knows about their business. Rosie finds Troy quite odd, and even thinks of him as a tweaker, but John is evident that the old man is alright as his aim is sharp, and he apparently looks stable. Later, the couple engages in an emotional conversation, with Rosie questioning how long they will have to live like this. John comforts his girlfriend and responds that there are a few more deliveries to make, and then he will talk straight to his uncle about leaving the town. It turns out that they are working for John's uncle, Neil, and are caught in the middle of his operation, hoping to escape his grasp and start a new life far away from their hometown. As the day wears on, John makes his way to his uncle Neil's place, only to find him giving a newbie some pretty hard time. After telling his nephew about today's delivery of $100,000, Neil begins to tell John the importance of being with the family. It turns out that after his father's death, Neil took care of him, and even allowed him to go into service. But now that his time in the army is over, John can concentrate on her uncle's business. John can do nothing but desperately wait for the time when he and his girlfriend will be free to go away from all the illegal stuff. As our protagonist leaves the restaurant with the fake number plates, he bumps into Troy's sons. We are getting a bad vibe from the boys, as they look quite suspicious and unstable. Anyways, on his way back home, John is pulled over by a lady police officer, Miss Burns, who knows what John does, and is desperate to find proof against him to stop all the illegal activities happening in the town. But after failing to find any proof to support her suspicion, she lets him go. When John is on his way home, he gets distracted by a trash can midway. He then gets out of the car, and places the can back in its actual position outside Troy's house, and returns home to receive today's delivery. Inside his garage, John meets with Neil's customer, where they carry out their illicit goods transaction. John also doesn't forget to have the customer's license plate swapped before hitting the open road once more. Keeping his cut from the total amount, he carefully places the remaining cash, intending to deliver it to Neil tomorrow. However, Rosie has another plan. She advises John to run away with Neil's money, but he refuses, saying greed makes people unlucky. As the two talk, Troy shows up out of nowhere with 2 bottles of beer. He politely asks John if John was on his land earlier that day, so John tells him about his empty trash can that was in the middle of the road. Things are going quite normal, until Rosie greets Troy and receives an unexpected response. In addition to commenting on her beauty, Troy flirts with her, and even grabs her hand tightly for a few seconds, making them uncomfortable. As Rosie returns to her bed, Troy extends the conversation by saying he also has the same telescope as John, but he uses his to keep an eye on his neighbors. It is quite shocking for John to hear this, until Troy reveals that he is just kidding. However, Troy notices that a car that drives on a nearby road always comes and goes with a different number plate. He mentions that everyone has their secrets, and then decides to leave because his sons are coming soon. As soon as Troy departs, John throws away the beer he was given, and stares at Troy's house through his telescope. His unease only grows when he spots Troy's sons, and recognizes them as the guys he came across at the restaurant earlier. This prompts him to hastily gather his money, and prepare to leave the area the next morning. As John readies himself for departure, he asks Rosie if she's ready to leave her friends and family behind, to which she replies affirmatively, declaring that they have no real friends. With that settled, John sets off on his last cash delivery to Neil before leaving. Left alone, Rosie begins checking the money they made from their illegal job, and thinking about what they could buy with it. But then, she is startled by the sound of a gunshot, and rushes to retrieve her telescope, aiming it toward Troy's house. At first, She sees nothing out of the ordinary, but soon she witnesses a gruesome sight that leaves her breathless. As Rosie watches in horror, Troy suddenly looks up, and his quick look leaves her in strict panic. Meanwhile, John has made his way to Neil's place, right when Neil's man grabs him by the neck. Here it reveals to us that by some means, Neil knew John's leaving him and threatened him not to think of this again. Terrified, John rushes back home while trying to call his girlfriend, but gets no answer. When he notices Rosie is missing, he searches the house but comes up empty-handed. Moreover, his 25 grand are still there when he quickly checks them out of curiosity. Determined to find his beloved, John heads over to Troy's land, hoping that he knows where she might be. Troy then tells John that a pretty girl like Rosie is the same, and that she might have left him for good. When John returns home, he continues his search, and catches a glimpse of the telescope, which he had kept in the bedroom before but is now in the living room. He realizes that Rosie had been looking toward Troy's house before she vanished. Overwhelmed by the situation, John decides to take a moment to relax with a drink at Troy's house, just as Troy did at his. However, when he arrives, he finds no sign of Troy anywhere, and the door isn't locked. As John searches for Troy, he becomes increasingly suspicious when he spots a telescope pointed directly at his own house.
You motherfucker.
Once he realizes that his house was being watched, he hears music coming from a hidden door in the bedroom, that leads down to a creepy basement. There, he discovers a disturbing array of cameras, and as he goes deeper, he finds a hallway with a secret passage at the end. Back in the basement, John finds that the hallway has many rooms, and his investigation takes a dark turn when he stumbles upon the lifeless body of a teenage boy. When he looks in another room, he discovers a terrified young woman named Sarah held captive in a cage. John promises to help her find her friend Cole, who's also being held somewhere in the basement. He goes to search another room, only to find Rosie there. Seeing Rosie has been captured in a cage, he tries to find a way to cut the cage lock, but before he could do anything, he hears the noise of Troy returning home. Knowing that Troy is alone at home, John decides to take him down by himself. After leaving Rosie in the basement, he goes upstairs with a knife in his hand. But before he could stab Troy, Troy's son, Cooper and Harley return home. John hides inside another room while listening to the family's conversation. Even after doing the dirty work of kidnapping people, it is revealed that Troy's son Cooper is afraid of homicide, and is suffering from trauma because of a recent hit on the young boy. Troy then boosts him up by assuring no execution without any reason, and wants him to do nasty work for him tonight. As Troy and his son decide to go into the basement again, John takes the step down there before them. Inside the basement, Troy, Cooper, and Harley prepare to commit a dreadful task, while John keeps listening to them. Here Troy's and his son's real jobs are revealed. They are kidnappers who torture people to get money from their rich parents. Plus, Troy the father also knows how rich the little girl's dad is. The boys wear strange masks, and bring Sarah to the present room, where she is fastened tightly to a chair, and is about to get tortured by Cooper. The father records the whole video, and will send it to Sarah's parents in exchange for money, while Cooper acts as if he's going to smash her. After recording the video, on Cooper's inquiry, Troy reveals his plan of getting rid of Rosie, because of her witnessing the boy slaughter before. John overhears them talking, and after they go upstairs, he runs straight to Rosie. He tells her to stay calm, and then sneaks out of the secret passage, and back to his house. John then collects the bolt cutter and gun, but as he is returning to Troy's basement, he witnesses Troy and his son disposing off the body of the boy they killed earlier. As John desperately looks for a way out of this, he spots a police car passing by, but to his surprise, the car drives straight towards Troy, where he soon discovers that Officer Burns is in cahoots with Troy and his son. Just as he tries to retreat, he runs into Cooper, and a scuffle ensues. Both of them fall into a pit filled with the dead rabbits that Troy hunted. John is forced to use his combat experience, and take drastic measures to silence Cooper. He forcefully shoves a dead rabbit into Cooper's mouth, causing him to choke and die. Now we know what this man is capable of, while John makes his way through the secret passage leading to the basement again. Unfortunately, Rosie is no longer in the room, as it is revealed that the boys have taken her to upstairs. Once John returns to the basement, he finally discovers Sarah's friend, Cole, who is injured and unable to move on his own. John breaks the chain holding Cole's cage, and then he approaches Sarah, telling her to help him escort Cole out of the basement while he goes for Rosie. Before going for Rosie's rescue, John instructs Sarah to throw a stone at Troy's house after counting to 100, in order to distract them. As John approaches Rosie from the basement, Sarah throws the stone, and the distraction causes them to leave Rosie unattended. This gives John the opportunity to save her, and escape from the basement. While Harley and Troy investigate the source of the commotion outside the house, they stumble upon Cooper's dead body lying in a pit. Grieving over Cooper's death, the father and brother are now consumed with a burning desire for retaliation against Cooper's murderer, but when they return inside, Rosie has disappeared. The family activates all the land lights and sets out on a mission to hunt down the perpetrator. As the four of them make their way to the truck, they run into Neil and his men, who want to prevent John from leaving his work. Just then, Harley and Troy unleash a barrage of gunfire. The bullets claim the lives of Neil's men and Cole, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. Despite the havoc, the group manages to escape in Neil's car, and as they speed away, Harley and Troy continue their relentless pursuit. But it looks like the bad guys have luck on their side, when Neil is shot to death and Officer Byrne intervenes. The hard struggle has just begun as John, Sarah, and Rosie are taken back to the basement. Officer Burns ties John up, while Troy takes charge of Sarah, and Harley brutally beats Rosie. After putting Sarah in handcuffs, Troy leaves to grieve for his dead son Cooper. Meanwhile, Harley unleashes his grief and anger on Rosie, mercilessly beating her and handcuffing her. As Harley goes near the helpless Rosie on the ground, she seizes the opportunity and uses the handcuff keys to free herself and handcuff Harley at the same time. Sarah also manages to free herself from the loose handcuffs after a fierce struggle. Back to Rosie, she picks up the camera they used to torture people, and beats Harley to death with the camera stand. Having just killed Harley, she immediately sets out to save John.
You know, it's hard.
She attacks Officer Burns with a tripod to finish her off. Meanwhile, Sarah manages to grab hold of the gun just as Troy arrives home. She doesn't know how to use the weapon, so Troy quickly snatches it from her grasp. John and Rosie approach the moment and rescue her on time. However, Troy is one step ahead. He extinguishes the lights and locks all the exits, plunging the house into darkness. He then releases gas shells to render them unconscious, and emerges with his shotgun, ready to take them down. After sending the girls downstairs, Troy begins shooting at John, leaving him no time to join the girls. When it seems like things are taking forever, John turns the tables. He holds a gun to Troy's head, ready to take him out once and for all. After pulling the trigger, the room is silent, as everyone in the family is dead. Later, John and Rosie set the criminals' bodies ablaze, in order to get rid of the evidence. By gathering the money they've saved, John and Rosie disappear into the night, determined to leave their criminal past behind. A couple of hours later, Sarah, who was rescued by John, is being questioned by the police about what happened. The movie ends with John and Rosie living their new life in Mexico, far away from the dangers of their past and a neighbor with a telescope. Okay guys, that's all the recap of The Neighbor 2016. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.